What tends to happen is every time you think that the perfect opportunity to make that change into entrepreneurship will arise, what happens is you're on the verge of leaving and then a better offer comes along. And every time that happens, it's almost like you get put into a new set of golden handcuffs.
One of the reasons I think that I've succeeded and been able to grow a business was that I looked at it and realized that there is no other option other than this working.
I think that's almost our secret weapon as entrepreneurs. It's that.
And that's just been so true for me. So I think that's a really good point that we can help people out with, is don't regret not starting earlier, because I certainly did.
And that is one of the biggest mindset shifts that you can have to set you up for success, not just in...
So for me personally, the breakthrough moment was when I realized that actually,
if you're thinking about starting a business and you're not sure, is this the right time for me to start? The single biggest piece of advice that I can give you is... Welcome to the Dropship Unlocked Podcast, where we unlock the secrets to high-ticket dropshipping and achieving financial freedom. I'm Lewis Smith, founder of Dropship Unlocked, and I'm joined by James Eardley, client success coach at Dropship Unlocked. Each episode, we'll be sharing our experiences and providing you with the tools you need to build a successful e-commerce empire of your own. From zero to owning £1 million online business, we'll help you achieve the ultimate freedom over your time, location, and financial future. And when we're not recording the podcast episodes or running our own e-commerce businesses, you'll find us helping people like you launch their own high-ticket dropshipping businesses. To learn more about working with us, head over to dropshipunlocked.com/free. Now sit back, relax, and get ready to access your full potential with the Dropship Unlocked podcast.
hello and welcome back to the Dropship Unlocked Podcast. I'm James Eardley, and today we're going to be talking about when is the right time to start a business. And importantly, is there a right time? Is there a perfect time to get started with a new business? So to discuss this today, we're going to have a chat with Lewis Smith, the founder of Dropship Unlocked, and we're going to have a really deep dive into the idea of timing the start of a new business today. So firstly, Lewis, let's dive really deep into this. First of all, I want to know what your experience is around timing the startup of a new business.
Well, this is a really important topic because I know there are so many people who are often held back unnecessarily by waiting for the right time to start. And me being one of them, I was initially in that same position where I found that making a start, becoming an entrepreneur, taking that jump, that leap was difficult initially. But it wasn't until I reframed the future that I started to realize the downside of not taking that jump actually outweighed the risk. And I'll explain a bit more about what I mean. So the way I did that was that I would look at people in the company that I used to work for and just think those who were 10 years further down the line than where I was at that point, were they living the life that I wanted to live 10 years from now? It's a simple question. And you could ask yourself the same. Are the people who are 10 years further down the path that you're in, are they living your dream lifestyle? Are they where you want to be? Because if they're not, there potentially is a misalignment in the trajectory of the path that you're on. And for me, when I looked at that and those individuals, they were successful, they were earning good money, but maybe they didn't have as much freedom or autonomy and time as I dreamed for myself in a decade's time. So I realized that at that point, every day that I didn't make the change, I was burning time. I was on the wrong path to get to the goal that I wanted to get to. So I had a stable 9-to-5 career and could have continued to try to work my way up the ranks. But the trouble is there's never a good time for you to jump and leave, especially if you're in a good environment and a comfortable role. What tends to happen is every time you think that the perfect opportunity to make that change into entrepreneurship will arise, what happens is you're on the verge of leaving and then a better offer comes along, or they offer you a promotion, or you get a job offer from somewhere else with a higher salary, and more perks. And every time that happens, it's almost like you get put into a new set of golden handcuffs. It's like they get tightened slightly because as those benefits and perks and promotion and salary go up, so does your lifestyle expenses and lifestyle creep. And then before you know it, all of your time's taken up and any way that you were looking at this potential alternative path is just gone because it's shut off because you're so busy with the things that you're now doing. So I think there comes a point, looking back, I very nearly could have been distracted with something like that, but you have to get to the point where you say, I'm doing it, and I think the moment that the penny dropped for me, I was just in this meeting room and I was surrounded by colleagues. We were all talking about some business case or something. It was a very clinical, sterile kind of meeting room where you're just sitting in there and looking out the window. And it was a really sunny day outside. And I was looking out at, the trees and like nice sun beating down on the grass outside. And I just thought, I just want to be outside right now. I want to be able to walk outside guilt-free, spend the day doing whatever I want, go and meet with my partner, Becky, enjoy this time and make the most out of every day. But because I couldn't do that in that moment on that day, I realized I don't have the autonomy that I want, and nothing's going to change for the next 10 years if I continue on this path. So for me, I realized at that moment, the penny dropped. I need to make a switch.
And I had the same experience as you, Lewis, where I was in a 9-to-5 and I was on this career path that I'd been told to go on, and it felt natural to carry on with that role and push up for a promotion and move on to the next job. But actually, I realised that that wasn't going to get me closer to where I wanted to be. And I did that exercise where I looked at the people around me and realised if I stayed on that same path and followed where those people had gone in 10 years' time, it wasn't anywhere near where I wanted to be in 10 years. So if I didn't start or didn't make a start soon, that's where I was going to end up in 10 years' time. So that there is a moment, and that's such a useful exercise to look around and predict where you're going to be if you don't make a change. So I guess it sort of comes into that point about when we think the stars might align, or we think all ducks are going to come into a row, all of those cliches, when it's all going to be the right time for us to make a start. But did that ever happen for you? Did it feel like there was a right time that presented itself for you to make a start with your business?
I don't think there is really a right time. The best time to start a business and to take action towards starting a business is now, because there is no perfect time to start a business. So waiting for that perfect moment is in itself a form of procrastination, and oftentimes one that we don't realize that we're using as an excuse not to just move ahead, take a step in the right direction. I think it's that underlying fear or avoidance of that initial discomfort and uncertainty. You're looking out into the abyss. You're thinking, I've not experienced that world outside of Earth's atmosphere. I need to know the path, but oftentimes you won't know the path until you begin. So you just have to leave it at some point. You have to leave that comfort zone, and I don't think there is a right time. I mean, yesterday I took my son, who's 2 years old, to a swimming lesson, and he told me he didn't want to get in the pool at first because it was too cold, right? So I kind of jumped in and I was like, look, I promise you, as soon as you jump in, it'll be absolutely fine. But he was hesitant, and you could see what was going through his mind, like the emotions on his face. On one hand, he saw me in the water. He wanted to experience the joy, the freedom of swimming and playing in the water. So that was the outcome he wanted, right? But he didn't want to go through that initial discomfort of gradually getting into slightly chilly water and that pain of going through that discomfort, that leaving your comfort zone, So eventually the thing to do is just jump in, because within seconds you're fine. And people often don't want to go through that pain and have that delayed gratification. So they maybe just say, I'll go swimming next week, or they never even go to the pool. They never even get in, right? But sometimes you just have to step out of your comfort zone and jump in. The water's not going to get any warmer the longer you leave it. It's just once you're in and you start moving, you'll soon warm up. And it's exactly the same in business. Once you're in business and you start and the wheels are in motion, you can change direction. That's the thing that people forget. You can ask for support when you inevitably get stuck, which you will. You learn from your mistakes. But if you just sit on the sidelines and watch and do nothing and just say, I read a few books about this and I know the plan, but you've not enacted any steps of the plan, then you're not going to get anywhere. It's like, as they say, you can't steer a parked car, right? If it's still, it doesn't matter how much you turn the steering wheel, it's not moving anywhere because you haven't got momentum. So you need to begin that journey.
I think that point illustrates getting started perfectly about jumping into the water. And actually, it shows amazingly with the 2-year-old son as well, how naturally it's born into us, that fear of leaving our comfort zone and going into discomfort. And it's just the way that our brains are wired naturally from the thousands of years of evolution, that we're naturally going to try and avoid discomfort and avoid leaving a comfort zone and safety. And instead, our brain wants us to take the easy path, the comfortable route that we've always gone down. And that's a brilliant illustration. We've got to then fight that inner mind, the thoughts that it gives us, to realize that it's just always going to try and keep us safe. But actually, to go after our goals and to achieve the outcomes that we want to achieve, we have to go against what our mind's telling us, because our mind will be able to come up with any excuse under the sun why now isn't the right time. So if we listen to that, then we'll never start. Instead, we need to realize that it's just trying to keep us safe and comfortable, and we need to push past that in order to go after our goals. Great story there. So I guess on that point that we think there may never be a perfect time for people to start, does that mean that people therefore should never start?
No, it just means that you've got to stop waiting for that supposedly perfect time, because if you have expectations of that time where the stars all align arriving, it will never come. It will never happen. So I think the best time to start is when you have a strong enough reason to start and a plan for the vehicle that's going to get you to the destination. So the way I like to think of this is you can either have a really strong push or a strong pull towards the goal that you want to get to. And ideally, you have both. So an example of a push would be something like, I hate my current circumstances. I hate my commute, or the boss that I report to, or the hours that I work, or my shift patterns, the life circumstances that I'm currently experiencing. They say that as soon as the discomfort of going through that change is less than the current discomfort that you're experiencing in your situation, then it's rational to change at that point, right? Because it's the lesser of the two long-term discomforts. And so that could be one thing where you think, I need to change that circumstance. So that's a push. An example of a pull or a desire towards getting to something could be that you've got your eyes set on a goal. Like, I want to move to Bali. I want to live in a villa with a pool and go out and surf every day and run my business from a laptop and have that freedom and control to go out for lunch and dinners and meet friends. And, that kind of thing could be your reason why. And putting that on a vision board, seeing it every day will give you that deep desire, that why, that will help you during those moments of fear where you feel like you're looking out over an edge of a cliff and thinking, I don't know what's going to happen here, but it remind you why you've got to keep jumping out of your comfort zone. So either of those is fine. And ideally, a combination of the two would be good. But the most important thing is not just having them, but it's getting clear on them, writing them down, putting some kind of a vision board with photos together, and then just referring back to that each and every morning and evening so that you know what your main drivers are to becoming an entrepreneur and launching your own online business, because those are the things that will carry you through to seeing success with it.
And having those goals in your mind from the very start, it's going to give you that push and that pull both together to realize what you'd be missing out on if you didn't make a start.
I think another thing that people often wait for is they wait until they have enough resources, enough money, enough cash to be able to go into a new venture. And I think this is a double-edged sword. It's a fine balance because, you want enough. Enough is good because enough gives you a buffer. It means you're getting the boat as close to the dock as possible before you make that jump. You have a safety net there. But sometimes you can have too much. If you wait until the point where you have these huge piles of cash and you've taken this massive payout or inheritance or whatever it is, one of these big life events that causes a huge influx of cash, sometimes the hunger goes. I've seen that from members who've considered joining us, and then, they've come into a couple of £100,000 of cash and they're like, I'm in no rush. I want to, think about things. I might go and invest in a bricks and mortar business. And it's a difficult one because it's like, well, you don't want to lose the hunger and the drive to create the business. I think that's almost our secret weapon as entrepreneurs. It's that drive, that motivation to get up and running, because that's the thing that will get you through the first year or so. It's that drive to succeed and like lighting the fire, knowing I've got to do this to feed my family. Now, as I say, it's a fine balance, and I wouldn't want to put you in a position where you feel like everything is dependent on this. So that's why we say it is good to have a buffer of certainly a few £1,000s to start any business. But when you have a strong enough drive and you have the resources available, but not waiting until you have a huge abundance of resources, that would, for me, is as perfect a moment as any to start a business.
Yeah, and I can relate to that. I know that I didn't feel completely ready when I made a start and started my e-commerce business because I didn't have a huge pool of resources that I could fall back on. But actually that became a real motivation for me in the first 12 months, was that I knew that I had to make it work, and I put it into my mind that I had to make it work no matter what. And that became my biggest drive. And one of the reasons I think that I've succeeded and been able to grow a business was that I looked at it and realized that there is no other option other than this working. So that can actually become one of your greatest assets. If you do need it to work, then that can really push you to keep going if things get tough and make sure you make a success of it.
Yeah, exactly. And people do fall into that trap. They fall into the trap of thinking that they need to wait for the perfect moment before acting to become an entrepreneur and start a business. It's almost like they don't feel they have the right to yet, or they want the circumstances to be even more perfect than they are currently. And so imagine, I'll say this to members of ours, that imagine if you're on a surfboard, right, and you're paddling out at sea to catch this wave because you want to start surfing it back into land. you paddle out and you see a wave that comes past and you think, oh no, that one's a little bit small, I'm going to wait for a better one. And then you see another wave that comes past later and it's like, oh no, that one's a bit too big, I want to make sure that I don't fall off, I'm apprehensive about this, I'm just going to keep paddling and waiting. Before you know it, you've been out there like an hour and then 2 hours, and you just keep making excuses for why the wave that's coming isn't perfect. There's always a better one coming. Oh no, that one wasn't perfect, or I wasn't quite positioned well enough for that. And you miss all these countless learning opportunities that you could have caught the wave, fallen off, learned why you fell off, and then just jump back on the next one. And so I'd say it's better to just start riding the waves as they come, even if they're not exactly what you expect, so that you don't end up in a position where at the end of the day, you realize, oh, well, the sun's setting now, it's dark, I didn't catch a wave all day, and I've got to go back to shore now, and I didn't learn anything. That's the thing with business. It's like you won't learn until you start trying to ride some of those waves.
Exactly. I think people come into starting a business thinking about, they've got two options. Either they get perfect now and start later and do all the preparation that they can beforehand so they feel ready when they start, or the other option is that you start now and get perfect later. And that's the title of a great book, by the way. And I think people need to realize that the first option isn't actually an option, because you can't get perfect before you start, because there's so much that you just can't possibly learn until you've started in a business. And you couldn't ever forecast the things that you're going to learn until you're actually on the job and doing it day in, day out and learning. So that procrastination, or waiting for the perfect wave, as you put it, is so easy to do, because you think, if I just wait for the perfect time where I learn a bit more about running a business or about accounting or learn a bit more about ads, then that'll be the perfect opportunity for me. But actually, all those things you can learn once you've started, and you'll learn it so much quicker when you've started as well. So really the important point is to start now and think about getting perfect later, which I think is a big point. So I think that's one of the main reasons people stop, is trying to get perfect. But from your experience, Lewis, of speaking to lots of people who are wanting to start a business, what do you think are some of the main reasons that hold people back from making a start?
Well, yeah, perfectionism is definitely one. And what was the title of the book that you were just recommending?
So that's called Start Now, Get Perfect Later.
Amazing. Yeah, so that's definitely one we can recommend reading. Another one that I'd recommend is one called Ready, Fire, Aim, which again is about just implementing, getting started, learning as you go. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely one, perfectionism. Another one that holds people back is a sense of maybe a fear of failure, or even a fear of imposter syndrome that holds so many people back. Maybe they had a conversation with a colleague in a hotel in London when I was still working in the job, and they said to me, we saw this group of like entrepreneurs who were really cool in this like swanky hotel, and they were all sitting there sipping their flat whites and had their MacBooks out and like running their businesses and stuff. And we looked at them, we're like, they're obviously like a group of entrepreneurs. You could tell they were headphones in, just working on whatever they were doing within their online businesses. And the colleague said to me, I'd always seen you as an entrepreneur. And I was like, she said, have you ever considered the startup world or entrepreneurship? And at the time, this is going back years now, but I remember thinking, I didn't think that I'd ever had permission for that. And it's almost like someone had to tell me that they saw me in that position for me to realize that, I've only got to give myself permission to become an entrepreneur and make that transition. No one else is going to tell me that you are now an entrepreneur from today. So it's that mindset shift. And it's like someone had just opened the door for me and told me, you can do this now. You can start this business. It was only me holding myself back with all these limiting beliefs that I had that was restricting my personality to, I'm just a good corporate employee and I take a salary and that's the person that I am. But as soon as you expand your identity and realize that, anybody can do it, you just have to have the willingness to learn along the way, I think that's very liberating.
Yeah, look, nobody's going to tell you that you are an entrepreneur or you're going to become an entrepreneur. You have to always tell that yourself. And I agree that everyone has entrepreneurial traits in them, but you need to bring them out. If you're in a job 9 to 5, you don't have to rely on any entrepreneurial sort of skills, but actually you've got them within you. You just need to decide that you're going to use them and use them to start your own business and start to go after your own goals.
Yeah, so when people are worried about failing as well, and they're thinking that's the reason why they're not starting, and whether that's the surface level reason or whether actually they come up with another reason that's like, I'll do it after my holiday, or I've actually got quite a busy season at work and then I'll do it after that, or I'm going through some stuff at the moment and I need to sort out some other business deals before I enter into this. Oftentimes those are, I think when you hear those and when you hear yourself saying them, you have to catch them and say, is that really the reason? Or is it deeper rooted than that? And oftentimes when you follow the thread right through to the deep level reason, it's fear of failure. It's that you don't want to put yourself out there in case you fail. And that is, I liken that to wearing a rucksack full of weights and trying to walk through life with that on your back. It's weighing you down. It's stopping you from reaching your full potential because you're constantly trudging along, trying to get through life, but everything's more difficult. And if you don't ever take the leap, it's because you feel so heavy. You feel like there's this weight. But as soon as you learn to let that go and just drop it, and you realize that you can release those worries, and it means you're so much lighter. It means that you can walk through life without it weighing you down. You've not got all of that conditioning from your friends and family and colleagues and all of those beliefs about entrepreneurship and how maybe that's not the label that was assigned to you. You can just let go of those things. You realize, and these are deep-rooted things because we've, up until this point in life, maybe these are things we didn't even realize. They're just subconsciously drilled into us. But as soon as you put that rucksack down and you realize that you can go through life in whatever way you want, you don't have to deal with anyone else's expectations, questions, worries, concerns. You are free to move. Most of those concerns are actually just projections anyway from other people. Most of the people who in your life tell you that, they may not say the words, hey, you can't do that, but they'll just express their doubts. And what they're trying to do, maybe not intentionally, they don't realize it, they maybe didn't take the opportunity that you now have at your fingertips. And they don't want to be proven wrong by you succeeding, because then they'll feel like they didn't take the right path in life, right? So it's almost like an insult on their identity that when they hear that you're on the verge of potentially making this life-changing change of direction and experiencing this newfound freedom that an online e-commerce business can give, and they feel like they're trying to help you by offering safe advice, but really what they're doing, it's in their interest deep down to keep you in your place, because they don't want to be left behind by you. And so they might feel later, if you succeed, they'll regret not having taken the opportunity that they wish they would have done years ago. So sometimes you really do have to tune out other people in your life and make sure that you're focusing on what you want to do and just putting down that rucksack.
Yeah, that's a really important point. You've got to almost look beyond the words that people are telling you from outside and look underneath at the reasons why people might want you to go down a safer route. They might have your best interests at heart, or they might just be looking out for themselves to make themselves feel better. But you need to look beyond the words and the warnings that they're giving you and think about perhaps why are they giving you those warnings, or why don't they think you should start. Try and reveal back the layers and look at that. And also on your earlier point, Lewis, I think it takes some self-awareness as well to look at your own thoughts and the excuses that you might be giving as to why now isn't a good time, and also to peel back those layers of the thoughts you're having and look at the deep-rooted reason. Perhaps it was definitely for me, but the reason that you had these excuses about not starting is actually that deep underlying fear of embarrassment or failure or something if it doesn't go right. But once you can see it for what it is, instead of the excuses that you give, like not knowing enough or not having any experience, those sort of the surface level reasons that you give, as soon as you look under that, you can start to tackle the real reason. And once you tackle that self-doubt and the fear of failure, and realize that that's all it is, it's a natural instinctive sort of brain mechanism that's in place, then you can start to get past that and really make a start into something and go towards the goals that you've got.
Yeah, and the fear itself that you mentioned actually manifests itself in various different ways. So one of those ways that's quite difficult to spot, especially when it's yourself experiencing it, is procrastination. You find yourself saying, okay, I'm going to launch this business, but the first few weeks it's all about logo design and creating the perfect website and doing all of these things. And you realize, are they essential in order to make your first few sales? Probably not. You could have a very basic logo and be in business quickly, make some profits, reinvest those profits into getting a great logo later. But people spend too long on the stuff initially. And the reason is because they're procrastinating, and it's a form of fear. They're trying to hold themselves back from taking the actions that might expose them to the risk of failure that they're worried about. So the other way that we see it happen is excessive research. We'll speak to people, potential members that might be thinking of joining our program, and they'll say, it all sounds great. Yeah, I'm totally in. I just want to spend a little bit more time doing a bit more research. And oftentimes what they really mean is they're seeking validation and reassurance from others. They might want to, say, hey, I'm thinking about joining this community. What do you think? Well, remember, that person's opinion about what we do is going to be very tainted by the choices they made in their life, right? So take that with a pinch of salt. Don't let someone else dictate your future by asking them for reassurance if they're not in a position that you want to be when you reach their point in life. So that's a really good one to catch. The other thing is too much reading. Sounds controversial, but there is such a thing as just doing too much reading. You're just trying to absorb as much information as you can, watch too much on YouTube, but it's all input and no output. You're not taking any action. And I think if you don't feel slightly scared every single day by the actions and the size of the actions that you're taking towards achieving your goals, then you're not taking big enough actions. You're not taking big enough steps. Unless they're slightly scary, then you're not leaving your comfort zone.
Yeah, having that fear in your stomach when you're about to do something, that's actually a great sign that you're about to grow personally, and whether that's in your career or wherever it is. If you've got that fear, which I'm familiar with now because I still try and put myself out of my comfort zone as much as possible, then that means it's a great sign that you're doing something that's difficult and it's going to get you somewhere. So this fear of failure that we see a lot, how would you recommend that somebody can actually get over that?
Well, the first thing is you need to not focus on the fear element of it, because that can be really paralyzing and it causes people to dwell and think about the worst case scenario. And what happens when you visualize the worst case scenario? Well, things start to head that way, right? You've got to make sure that what you're thinking about is the upside. Of course, protect your downside, be aware of it, make sure you go through some step-by-step training so you're not reinventing the wheel, make sure you're around other people who you can ask, make sure you have a bit of a financial buffer of a good few thousand just in case, right? Things happen, because they will at some point happen, so you've got to be prepared for that. But once you realize that you're okay with the downside, you've protected yourself from that, then at that point, you may as well go for it, because you want to be focusing on that vision board we talked about at the beginning, the desire or the pull. What are you trying to get to? Focus on that rather than on the downside, and you become an optimist instead of a pessimist, right? It's like standing on the edge of a diving board at a pool and you're looking down at the water. If all you're thinking about is, I'm just going to belly flop and it's going to sting so much and it's going to hurt and I'm going to get winded and I might break my arm the way I hit the water and it's going to be like, what's going to happen if you're up there and you're like, I need to just do a bit more research before I do this. So let me just get out my, textbook on trigonometry and figure out like the angles in which I'm going to hit the water and make sure it's the right angle, because that's going to dictate the way that I hit the water. And let me get my laptop out and watch a documentary on diving and like the technique. Like, you can see where I'm going. You're making too much research about something that really the only way you're going to figure it out to a certain extent is just jumping in. So you jump in off the diving board and you realize that, okay, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't an amazing swan dive that you hoped for, but you realize, well, what happened? Oh, maybe I over-rotated slightly, or maybe I just need to change the angle slightly. And so you get back up and you do it again. It's like that in business. It's like you can't overanalyze things to the extent that you don't even make a jump, because by doing that, you'll never even know what you need to improve on. So I think the biggest regret that people have is looking back on a former part of their life and thinking, I wish I'd made the jump then.
That is so true for me. As soon as I started, I looked around and realized, why didn't I start this 12 months ago? Why didn't I start 2 years ago when I first had the initial thought about starting a business? Why did I go further down the line with a uni course or going through my 9 to 5? And it wasn't until I'd done it and made a start and then realized, oh, it wasn't that bad after all. Why didn't I make this start long ago? And it was such a breakthrough for me. And I realized that actually a lot of these fears that hold us back, we'll regret having them once we get started. And I think if you look at where you want to be in 12 months' time, you'll either be very pleased that you started today, or in 12 months' time, you'll wish you had started today, but you started later or you didn't start at all. And that's just been so true for me. So I think that's a really good point that we can help people out with, is don't regret not starting earlier, because I certainly do. So with that in mind, had I have come to you, Lewis, when I was having these thoughts that I didn't realize I would go on to regret, what would you have said about getting me over that fear of failure and over that fear of starting?
Yeah, I think one of the best ways of doing it is like, if we could allow the current you from the future, right, to speak to the former you, that would have been the most compelling way of doing it, right? But unfortunately, oftentimes when we're in the position where we're considering something, we can't speak to the future us. But what we can do is hear from people who are further down the line than us on an opportunity with a business venture. And so I think you have to view these things with a growth mindset. You have to look at the challenges that inevitably lay ahead are not going to be setbacks. They're not going to be these huge obstacles you can't overcome. They're just challenges and opportunities for growth, because every time you overcome one of them, you learn something and you figure out the way to do it in the future. It's a bit like if you open up a puzzle, right? Your box with thousands of puzzle pieces, and you just look at them and half of them are up the wrong way and they're just all over the place. it's overwhelming, right? You just look at it and think, how on earth do I get started? What do I do? But you don't, like, people would never complete puzzles if they just took that view on things. You adopt a growth mindset. You set realistic, achievable goals, and you find one piece and you think, okay, where does this piece go? Maybe you find a corner piece and you think, well, at least I know that's a corner, right? So let's start there. And you start to put the other pieces of the puzzle together. And maybe occasionally you put the wrong piece and you realize, oh, that was a mistake. Okay, yep, now I see. And it starts to come together. You know, the picture starts to emerge and you can see that progress and those accomplishments you've made. And with business, each of those puzzle pieces is like a challenge that you overcome along the way of getting there. So don't just stare at the overall picture and think, I'm never going to be able to do it. If you were to work with a group of people who already have completed puzzles, then you're probably going to get to the point of having yours completed too without making a lot of costly mistakes along the way.
It's so easy to look at people who are already running £1 million businesses and be overwhelmed by the amount of difference there is between them and you at this point now. But you don't need to look at that as like, you know, that's their chapter 20. You don't need to look at that when you're just starting your chapter 1. You know, look at others who are around you. Try and get around people that are also just getting their chapter 1 together. And that makes it a lot more manageable because you can just look at the first goal that you need to achieve on your way, and then everything else will take care of itself until you get to chapter 20 as well and you've reached that goal. So yeah, breaking it down into manageable tasks has been big for me as well.
Yeah, and I would have said exactly the same to you had you come to me and said, hey, I'm worried about that risk of failure, that fear of failure. I was out yesterday as well teaching my son to ride a bike, right? He's 2, as I say, so he's on one of these like tiny little bikes at the moment. But we've just got him one of these balance bikes that doesn't have pedals, but it's like a step up from the real baby bike, right? But it's not yet a full bike with pedals and stabilizers, but it's one step at a time. I wouldn't just put him on a mountain bike and be like, off you go. You know, it's like you have to work up to that point. And so, yeah, he'll start on the small one. He'll probably fall off a few times and graze his knee, and then it will be a bit of crying. And then you kind of like, you build up to that confidence level of saying, right, now you're ready for a bike with stabilizers. You wear your helmet and you go, and again, you probably fall off a few times in a safe environment with people that can help him. And then eventually get to the point where he can have a mountain bike and go through the woods and do all of the, you know, the jumps and stuff. And you get to that point, but you can't expect that you'll be there on day one. So it's that delayed gratification and just having the confidence to know that those initial setbacks will become learning opportunities that will shape your future success.
It can be hard to notice those bumps that you have along the road unless you've got somebody around you, which is, I guess, the mentoring role that you have with your son. Is it makes a huge difference for somebody getting started with something if they are around a support mechanism that can show them the way or remind them that any bumps in the road is just natural and is just part of the progress. So yeah, it all ties into having a support system around you, and that can help us to get over that fear of failure. Another reason that I think I remember that stopped me from starting initially, as well as the fear of failure, was this sort of self-doubt and not knowing whether to start, and that sort of ties in with a fear of failure as well. So what are other reasons that might be holding people back, from your experience that you've seen, holding people back from starting a business?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons is the overwhelm itself, the confusion and uncertainty about where to even begin with the business that they're trying to create. When you first go into this and say you're just going it alone and you're trying to piece together the pieces, it's like you walking into a maze and just thinking like, okay, well, it all looks the same. I have no idea what direction to go because there's no proven path, right? It's not until someone hands you a map and says, right, as soon as you go in, turn left, then at the wall, turn right, and then, you know, eventually you get to the center and that's your way through the maze. And so I think having the blueprint, the roadmap, the whatever you call it, the steps from the beginning will help take away that anxiety, that overwhelm, that confusion, because you think, okay, I've got a trusted process here I can just follow of people who have navigated through this maze and come out the other side. So having that, identify your business model, follow a step-by-step plan in launching the business. Don't try to reinvent the wheel and be a pioneer by doing it. You can do that later with the funds that you create from the first business if you want to, when you can take more of a risk. But break the process down into just smaller, more manageable tasks, reduce that overwhelm, and you'll start to piece together this puzzle in a way that you'll start to see it come together. So a great book about this that we have both read, I know is a really good one, is The 12-Week Year by Brian Moran. We talked about it in previous episodes, but it's a really nice way of taking a big task, such as starting a business like this, breaking it down into 12 weeks, and then each week breaking that down into sub daily activities that need to be done to get you towards that end goal. And sometimes you look at the size of the things that we achieve in 12-week sprints within our business, and most people wouldn't achieve that in a year.
It's been a real game changer, that book, and it really puts the focus onto what one action can you take each day that after following that for 12 weeks will get you to an unbelievable destination that you want to achieve. And on the point you made, I think if people do have that confusion and overwhelm, then that's even more reason to start and get started with a training program around you, or at least a support system. Because when you do feel overwhelmed and you're not sure which path to take because there's so much information out there, you can clearly follow the exact steps that somebody else has followed or is guiding you to take, instead of getting overwhelmed and continually being confused and not knowing which direction to take. Certainly huge for me to be around a support system when I got started. So we've touched on it before. It's important that people have a very clear goal and a pull towards their goals that's going to get them out of their comfort zone. So we mentioned before how important it is to have a big goal that means a lot to you in order to get started and keep pushing and growing. But now that you're on the other side of starting, what is the sort of potential that waits on the other side for people if they do start, in particular, a high-ticket dropshipping business?
Yeah, the first thing is relying too much on the push is dangerous, because as soon as you are out of that environment, if that was the only thing driving you, your motivation dries up, it's gone. Right? So if you just rely on I hate the current situation that I'm in, well, as soon as you build a business like this and make your first £10,000 month, you're like, okay, well, I did it. So what now? You're expecting the marching band to come through and it's like this huge celebration, and you just realize, so that's it then, I guess that was it. I've achieved my life's goal, so you have to have something that's bigger. And it's a bit like if you're sailing out on your boat into the open waters, uncharted waters, right? You don't know yet what you're going to discover, but what's out there is going to be more exciting than what we've come from. Eventually, you just have to go out and discover these new things. And as you set sail, you come across these new lands and experiences and adventures and all these cool things, and you have the freedom now to chart your own course in life, right? It's just that you broke through that fear and you set sail in the first place, and so many people never pluck up the courage to do that. But what lays on the other side of that is all of those amazing new lands and adventures and things that you can do. So for the high-ticket dropshipping business model, it's the freedom to be able to run your business from wherever you want, the freedom to work as little as a couple of hours per week once you have things automated and outsourced, the ability to create a saleable asset that in the future you sell for hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds, that then creates a life-changing cash liquidity event in your life that you can then use to purchase, a family home, or create a charity, or do things that are on your real bucket list that you want to achieve in life. And so you have to just ask yourself, do you want to be one of the people who look back in years to come and regret not having taken that jump and not knowing what might lie on the other side of the fear that you're currently looking at? Or do you want to have the potential to create a product or service or brand that makes a real impact on people's lives, that especially your own and your team's lives? And launching a business is one of the most rewarding experiences that you can possibly do in life, especially an online business using our home turf advantage model.
And I can personally vouch for the lifestyle that a dropshipping business allows, and the freedom that I've got now compared to when I was in a 9-to-5 job. It's just incomparable, really. So say that people have decided that they're ready to start and they want to start, but maybe something that's holding them back is they don't know whether high-ticket dropshipping is the right business model to get started in. What would you say are the reasons why people don't start with high-ticket dropshipping, and maybe the reasons how you overcame those barriers?
Something that I had to overcome personally in my early journey with building an e-commerce business using high-ticket dropshipping was the competition and the market saturation, right? So I looked at other companies out there that were maybe selling the products that I was considering building my stores around early on, and thought, but it's so crowded. It's like walking into a crowded room, like no one's ever going to notice me. But you realize eventually, well, I've just got to do something to make myself stand out, to make myself unique in that competitive landscape. So one of the ways in which we did that was I shifted it so that I wasn't worried so much about the number of competition out there and the number of competitor retailers who were in a market that I was maybe considering going into. Instead, I viewed that as a validation that, well, those people are out there, they're making money. I'm not expecting to own the whole market. I don't want 100% market share in the industry I'm going into. Maybe one day I'll make a play for that, and that will be a huge we'll build some huge conglomerate and acquire all the others. But for now, I just want to create a full-time income that I can earn from a laptop. And so I only need to be in a proven market in order to do that. You need a very small slice of the pie if you go into a big enough pie, right? So I think that you shift your perspective and focus on the huge opportunities that are growing, and e-commerce is growing so significantly at the moment that there are some really clear growth trends. And I've got some stats here actually in front of me that I can share. So some of the statistics about the growth of e-commerce in the UK. In 2020, e-commerce sales in the UK reached £200 billion, which was a growth of 13.1% up from the previous year. The share of online retail sales in the UK reached 33.2% in 2020, up from 21% in 2019. So telling us that the actual share that's moved online is even increasing, not to mention the market itself is expanding. The number of UK businesses selling online has increased 9.3% since 2019. All of the stuff that happened in recent events has only accelerated the shift of e-commerce, with online sales accounting now for a record 36.2% of all retail sales since November 2020. And the UK now is the third largest e-commerce market in the world, behind only China and the United States. So people say, oh, don't I need to work in the US? Don't I need to have access to a bigger market? Don't I need to launch my brand globally from day one? The answer's right there in the statistics. In order to make a full-time income and a 6 or 7 or even 8-figure business eventually, if you want to, you don't really have to venture further than the UK if you pick your market correctly and you build the type of business that can enable you to do that. There's lots of room for new businesses to succeed, especially as the demand itself is starting to increase from consumers as well.
Yeah, and that's a crazy statistic. I didn't know that until I looked it up earlier this week, that the largest e-commerce market in the world, obviously US and China, then the UK, a third on that list as the largest e-commerce market in the world, which is an amazing stat, and it just shows how much potential there is in the UK. So on this competition point, I like to use the analogy of a pizza. And if you think about a pizza as the market that you want to enter, a lot of people get too focused on the actual shape of the pizza slice that they have within that market, instead of the size of the pizza that they're entering, or the market that they're entering. So if you've got just a third of a 20-foot pizza, that's going to be so much more of a larger business compared to having 100% of a 1-foot pizza. So think more about, with that analogy, it's not about the shape of your slice, it's about the actual size of the pizza itself. So as well as getting over the fear of competition, you mentioned earlier about being able to focus on delayed gratification instead of instant gratification. How did you manage to start knowing that you're always going to be waiting for sort of some delayed gratification before you got those rewards?
I think you have to look for earlier wins in the process. You have to celebrate those victories as they come, and not just say, I'm only celebrating when I hit 7 figures with the business, because that's quite a difficult thing psychologically to delay your gratification up until. But if you can just remind yourself that success is not just measured through revenue or market dominance in an industry, you celebrate the small things like, you've reached your first 10 sales, or you've reached your first 1,000 sales, or you've hit a certain level of revenue. Maybe it's your first 10 grand month or £10,000 day or week or whatever. You mark those things. And maybe one of them is a bit more personal, where it's like, mate, I've been on holiday with my family for the first time, where whilst I was there, I was earning money. That's not measurable in terms of like tangible. It doesn't matter how much money. It's more a case of that you no longer were trading your time for money. For the first time ever, you've been on holiday with your friends, your family, and whilst you were there, you earned more in what the holiday cost you through your online business. That's just a shift in how you start to accumulate wealth. The other thing is to make sure that you're enjoying the process and the journey of building the business. Don't just focus on, I can't wait until I've completed the whole puzzle, because at that point, I'll take a photo of the completed puzzle and that'll be it. It's job done. The reason people do things like puzzles, right, is not so that they complete them and then it's just done, check the box. Well, certainly not most people. Most people do it because it's relaxing, it's enjoyable, it's the challenge, they enjoy the process of finding all of the pieces. So it should be the same with business. Try and enjoy the journey and the process if you can, because then as you go through those difficult times, it doesn't matter that you're not quite there yet, because you're enjoying the process of building, optimizing it. I know for me, the biggest motivator for me is just the challenge. It's the thing that I love, building up businesses. So understanding that there's enough in any business as well is another way of getting over it. I think having a view of the market, like you used with your pizza analogy, is like knowing that other people don't need to fail so that you can succeed, or vice versa. you don't need to fail because other people are succeeding, right? There's enough for everybody there. You can expand a market. You can expand a market by bringing people into that market who maybe were never there before. For example, because that's quite arbitrary, let's use the example of the barbecues that we often go to. Just because you are entering the barbecue market doesn't mean that you come in and the whole industry of who buys barbecues remains exactly the same and you're now just stealing some market share. Think about market expansion as well. Are there people out there who maybe weren't in the market to buy a barbecue who now, when they see your ads, might be convinced because of a compelling offer or value proposition or some great marketing or a cool video that you run, and they think that would be really cool for us. We weren't really thinking about it, but let's buy one. So you've expanded that industry. This is what I mean by the abundance mindset. You don't have to be limited by the current parameters of that market. And then finally on that one, something that I found really helpful was with having this abundance mindset, you look at the other people who are already succeeding in the industries that you're thinking of going into, right? So you're thinking of launching this e-commerce store in an industry and you see these other big retailers in there. Reframe that concern as, well, if there are competitors in a market and they're all succeeding in business, why can't I? Then you're forced to answer the question, do you believe that all of those other people had and started with something that you don't have? Do you believe it's genetic, that the problem, like that you can't succeed but they can? Because if it's not, where it's like, well, what did they have that you don't have or that you can't learn or acquire? And that's a huge leveler, because you realize eventually they're just people like us. They're business owners, individuals that launched businesses in probably what were very competitive marketplaces when they joined, but they didn't let that hold them back. And that is one of the biggest mindset shifts that you can have to set you up for success, not just in the home turf advantage model of dropshipping, but in any business.
Yeah, that is a really great perspective. I think it shows that this question about when's the right time, really it all does come down to your mindset and having that breakthrough, maybe listening to this podcast or watching something or listening or reading something else. So for me personally, the breakthrough moment was when I realized that actually there is no such thing as a perfect time. There is just time, and it's what we do with that time that really makes the difference. So onto some practical advice now, I'm keen to give away to our listeners. What would you say to people that are thinking about starting a business but aren't sure whether it's the right time right now?
Yeah, if you're thinking about starting a business and you're not sure, is this the right time for me to start? The single biggest piece of advice that I can give you is deciding on the right business model from the outset. We suggest the home turf advantage model of dropshipping. It's because it's what I've done, it's what you've now done, it's what 700 of our members in the program and counting are all doing and going through. And so it's a proven model and you can just follow it step by step. The next thing would be to set your goals and put together a plan to actually achieve them. As we talked about earlier, one of the biggest fears and problems from holding people back is that overwhelm, that confusion. So, when they construct these huge bridges out to sea and they're trying to connect two bits of land, they don't just build the whole thing at once. They do it section by section, step by step, and they plan it down to the centimeter so that they're using a blueprint. They're building it from that, like you're building your business. And before you know it, the two ends of the bridge start to meet in the middle. They come together piece by piece. The whole thing has been assembled and you can now drive across it and enjoy the journey. But it didn't happen overnight. Once it's built, yes, you've got this masterpiece that provides value to those who use it, so your customers for your business, for many, many years to come, without you doing much of the work because you front-loaded that work. But at some point, you have to make the decision, am I going to build this bridge? Am I going to build this business? Because unless you decide to get up and take action and you just continue to take input and read books and watch videos, then it's never going to come together. And then as well as having the step-by-step blueprint on how to build the business, how to put together the puzzle, surround yourself with a supportive network of individuals who are doing what you're doing. Seek mentorship, seek coaching. Don't try and be the smartest person in the room. I find that if I'm feeling like I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. That's how the saying goes. So never underestimate the influence that the people you surround yourself with can have on you. And I mean that both in a positive sense and a negative sense. Remember what we talked about earlier, but the people who are projecting their fear of you overtaking them on you. If you're seeking validation and advice from those people in your life, be very careful what you pay attention to. But also on the other side of that, if you're around people whose baseline is here and you're here, you're going to start to rise up your minimum level of output to what theirs is to try and match it. So be very intentional about who you keep in close contact with. get into a supportive, positive community of entrepreneurs who are all on that same path as you, all working together to follow a proven blueprint to build their businesses.
Yeah, great point. And it can't be underestimated, the power of getting around the right types of people to push you on and to get you to your goals. The key one for me, the key advice that I'd love to give to my former self before I started, was that you need to realize the potential upside that you're about to gain and how much more compelling that is than staying as you are. And if you don't make that start, nothing's ever going to change. And also look into the excuses or the reasons you're giving as to why you can't start right now, and think about, is that the real reason, or is there a real underlying reason that's stopping me? I know I started at the end of 2020, early 2021, and there were so many reasons that I could have picked out, as you can imagine, with what was going on at the time, as to why it wouldn't have been a good time to start, all of the uncertainty that was around. So I could have come up with reasons. There's always going to be a reason, no matter what time. Even now, there's more reasons you can pick out as to why now isn't a good time. But you have to realize that that perfect time isn't going to come around the corner. The stars aren't going to align, and you have to decide for yourself that it's either now or never for me. So on that point, Lewis, I guess, any final advice for people that want to get started?
Yeah, just to summarize, don't let that fear of failure or fear of the unknown hold you back. Remember, as I was sitting in that meeting room looking out, and that moment of realization I had with the sun outside beating down on the grass, I just thought, if I don't do something now, I'm not going to end up in the position that I want to be in 10 years from now. And so you've got to find something that excites you, that means you want to leave your comfort zone. And if you take action and start making progress towards your goals, step by step, like building the puzzle, it will start to take shape. You'll start to see the outcome of what you've been building. And finally, I have to remind anyone who needs to hear it right now that you have to believe in yourself and your abilities to succeed. You have to have that belief personally. You can't wait for other people to give you permission or validation from those in your life who are, considering the path that you're taking. Remember, their advice will often be tainted with their own previous life choices and potential regrets as well. So if they played it safe and stuck to the normal life, and that's not the life that you want to have for yourself, then make sure that you're not seeking permission and validation, because you won't get it. And just remember, the magic happens outside of the comfort zone. So take that step. We're here to help you whenever you're ready to get started.
Yeah, thank you, Lewis. I can tell that all of your advice today really does come from a honest, genuine place that you want to help others, and things that have held you back and things that have held me back in the past. We just want to help others to see through that and be able to go on to achieve your goals. And that's absolutely where we're coming from. So before we take a question from a listener where we can hopefully help out somebody else today, I guess some final advice, because it's easy to give people some really broad advice, but what can we give as like a practical first step to take if they want to get started with their business journey today?
Yeah, if you're listening to us and thinking about starting your own high-ticket dropshipping business, and you'd like the sound of the home turf advantage model that we use, but you're wondering, is it the right time? Head over to dropshipunlocked.com/free to learn more about what we do. And if you like the sound of it, we'd love to help you get started on your journey and get you to the point like we've done for so many other hundreds of our existing Dropship Unlocked members already. Just a quick heads up, if you'd like to share your questions, stories, successes, or challenges, you can email us directly at podcast@dropshipunlocked.com. And you never know, we might even feature you on the next podcast episode.
Also, if you want access to today's show notes or any of the resources we've mentioned in the episode today, then head over to dropshipunlocked.com/podcast. We also have a small favor to ask of you. If you enjoyed the show so far, you could take a minute to leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice.
You wouldn't believe how much your reviews help us grow the podcast. We'll even read out some of our favorites on the next episode. So if you want to be featured on the show, please do go ahead and leave us a review today. Thanks so much for your support. We really couldn't do it without you, and we absolutely love hearing what you think of the podcast.
So now we're on to the part of the show where we answer a question from one of our listeners. And this question has come in from James P. And James has asked, can you share any specific tips and tricks that you've learned along the way which have increased your store's conversion rate and overall sales?
Wow, thanks for the question, James P. That is a big topic, and we could probably do a whole hour podcast just on conversion rate optimization, so improving that conversion rate on your store. But you've asked for one specific tip or trick, so here's one specific tip or trick that you could action from today. Add an email to your abandoned cart or welcome series of your emails that you've set up using something like Klaviyo, which is what we teach in the program, and have it written like a manual email. So don't have clever banners and make it look all professional and shiny with your logo. Make it look like you, the company founder, are personally sending a short one-line email to that person and just ask them the simple question, why they haven't purchased from your store yet. Was there anything that they needed help with before they make their purchase? You will receive such a good response rate from that because people will think that you're the person writing it because it's not some polished email marketing campaign. And oftentimes they'll tell you the reason why they didn't yet purchase. And that information you can use to then either get them on the phone and overcome that, or you can actually make a tweak on your site that does get them to the point of making a purchase. So there's one little tip for you. And maybe James will have to do another episode dedicated to conversion rate optimization itself at a later date.
Definitely. It's a huge topic. That's a really good tip that I've definitely put into my store, and it has made a big difference. So really good tip there. Remember, if you want to get your question into the show, then we want to help you out. We want to answer your questions. So simply email us, and the email address is podcast@dropshipunlocked.com, and we'll be answering your question on a podcast episode very soon. So now on to a listener review, a brilliant part of the podcast to close up and to say thank you very much for the reviews that we've received. And it's a big thank you to Charles76 for sharing her thoughts on the podcast. So Charles has said, very informative and inspiring podcast, simply and clearly explained, an excellent resource for both beginners and more seasoned dropshipping business owners. Thank you. Amazing.
We really appreciate your kind words, Charles76. So thank you very much. And if you'd like to hear your review featured on our podcast, then just leave us a rating and review on your platform of choice, whether you're listening to us on an app or drop us a comment on our YouTube channel as well. And don't forget to share this episode with someone special. Maybe you know someone who's been dreaming of starting their own business and could use a little bit of inspiration. Spread the love and help them take their first step towards their entrepreneurial journey.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast. We hope you found today's episode useful and inspiring.
Remember, if you're ready to take the next step towards creating your own high-ticket dropshipping business, our step-by-step mentorship program can help. Just head to dropshipunlocked.com/free to learn more and get started on your own journey to financial independence.
Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss another episode, and leave us a review if you've enjoyed what you hear today. We love hearing from our listeners, and we'll even read out some reviews on the next episode.
And finally, thanks for choosing to spend your time with us today. We really appreciate you, and we'll be back soon with more valuable insights and tips on high-ticket dropshipping.